I told you not to wear that dress.
Mia Rossi was going on a scheduled trip with the Mafia families, and she already knew what she wanted: to provoke Vito Genovese. It all started innocently enough, a teenage crush on her brother's older friend, and evolved into A-art, short dresses when he visited, smiles at the right moment, exchanged glances, accidental touches that made his jaw lock, years of provocation and tension. And now, at the family's dinner, she chose a red dress, short and devastating. And when Vito saw it, when she walked past him, slow, intentional, he said in a husky, dangerous voice, "If I see you walking around in that dress again." He stopped and didn't finish, because the empty threat didn't scare Mia, and they both knew she would wear it again, just to see what he'd do this time with them under the same roof. And hello, my name is Lena, the creator of this channel. Right now on screen, I'm showing you Darlene and Barbara's comments. Thank you so much for the compliments, everyone. But before we continue, answer me this. Do you think a relationship with a mobster can work out for someone who wants to forget the Mafia forever? Tell me down below, and maybe your comment will appear in the next video. Chapter 1. Red Dress and Warning.
Wear it for me.
Cecilia was sitting on my bed, watching my every move with that conspiratorial smile she always had when the subject involved her brother, and I pretended not to notice how much she loved seeing me in this insane dance that Vito and I had been keeping up for years. Dinner would be tonight, and both families would be gathered at the Genovese mansion, which meant he'd be there too, and that certainty made my heart beat faster than I'd like to admit. Dinner tonight, both families, Vito's going to be there, Cecilia finally said, breaking the silence in the room while I held the red dress against my body and looked at myself in the mirror. I know, I responded, holding the fabric that seemed to slide between my fingers like a dangerous promise. This one? Cecilia got up from the bed with that huge smile. That's ammunition, girl. He's going to lose it completely. I put on the dress, feeling the fabric hug every curve of my body in a way that was elegant, but provocative at the same time. And red was the color I knew he couldn't ignore ever since Cecilia told me about that story of the burned photo. How does it look? I asked, turning to face her. Perfect, Cecilia declared, coming up to me to adjust the neckline. It's hugging your curves without being vulgar. It's got that "I want to see more" touch, but hides enough for his imagination to do the rest. The neckline is perfect for imagining. She paused, and her eyes met mine. Girl, you're going to marry my brother eventually, and the sooner you two stop being proud idiots, the better. The problem was, I wanted him to ask me first, and show that he actually felt something beyond this physical tension that existed between us. He's never said he loves me, I murmured, adjusting my hair. Cecilia rolled her eyes so dramatically I almost laughed. Because he's a don, a boss. Admitting feelings is weakness in his idiotic head, she said with that irritating certainty. But everyone sees how he looks at you, how tense he gets when you're around. So I keep provoking him until he gives in, I said with determination. You're diabolical, Cecilia laughed. I love it. When we arrived at the Genovese mansion a few hours later, along with Levi and my parents, I felt that familiar adrenaline rising up my spine as we crossed through the imposing gate. The mansion was lit up and full of expensive cars parked at the entrance, and I knew inside there were at least 20 people between the two families gathered for another one of those dinners that mixed business with social. I took a deep breath before getting out of the car and felt the red dress slide down my legs as I stood up, and then I put on my heels and fixed my hair loose down my back, knowing exactly the effect it would have when I walked into that hall. Levi shot me a warning look that I pretended not to see because my brother knew very well what I was doing, but he never interfered because deep down, he also thought Vito needed a push to act once and for all. The main hall was packed when we walked in, and the sound of conversations and laughter filled the luxurious space, but my eyes searched for only one person in the middle of all those people. And then I saw him talking with Lisandro near the window with a glass in his hand, and that relaxed posture that hid the predator he really was. And when our eyes met across the entire hall, I saw the exact moment he recognized me. Vito froze completely, and the glass stopped in midair halfway to his mouth, while those dark eyes traveled over every inch of my body with an intensity that made my stomach flip. His jaw locked in that way I knew so well, and that meant he was losing the precious control he maintained over everything. And even from far away, I could see the tension taking over him. Bro, you're drooling, I heard Lisandro say with that amused tone he always used to provoke Vito. I'm not, Vito responded, but his voice sounded too tense to be convincing. You are, and Mia knows it, Lisandro continued. And I almost laughed because he was right. Look at her, she's coming this way. I started walking toward them slowly, and purposely swaying my hips a little more than necessary, and each step I took across the hall made more people turn to look at me, but the only person who mattered was standing there watching me, like I was the most dangerous thing he'd ever seen. When I passed really close to Vito, deliberately brushing my arm against his, I felt his entire body go tense, and then I murmured a, "Hi, Vito," Lisandro, in the softest voice I could manage before continuing to walk. But I didn't get very far because his hand grabbed my arm gently but firmly, stopping me from going forward. And when I turned to face him with the most innocent expression I could make, I saw that his eyes were darker than normal. "Mia, wait," he said in that husky voice that always made me feel things I shouldn't feel for a man who never admitted wanting me. "Yes?" I asked, tilting my head and waiting because I knew he was fighting internally with what to say, without seeming like he was losing control in front of everyone. Vito looked at the dress, and then back at my eyes, with an intensity that made my heart race, and then his voice came out low and dangerous when he spoke. "That dress." He started clenching his jaw again. "It's too short and too tight, and every man here is looking at you." I almost laughed because that was exactly what I wanted, but instead I tilted my head and deliberately provoked. "So what? Are you jealous, Vito?" The way his jaw clenched even harder was answer enough, but he tried to disguise it with that pathetic excuse about safety. "I'm not jealous. I'm worried about your safety," he said, and I almost rolled my eyes. "Dressing like that attracts the wrong attention." "Wrong attention or your attention?" I shot back, crossing my arms, and loving seeing him get more and more tense. That's when Vito took a step closer to me, completely invading my personal space, in a way that made everyone around notice that something was happening, and his voice came out even lower and more dangerous when he growled, "If I see you walking around in that dress again." He stopped mid-sentence, realizing he was too close, and that people were watching, and then he stepped back a little. "Forget it. Go have fun." He let go of my arm and left too quickly to seem calm, and I stood there alone, smiling, because I knew I'd gotten exactly what I wanted. Lisandro appeared at my side, laughing quietly, and shaking his head in an amused way. "You're cruel, Mia, and I love it," he said, crossing his arms. "But be careful because my brother has a limit, and you're getting dangerously close to it." "Good," I responded, still looking at where Vito had disappeared. "I want him to reach his limit, because only then will he admit what he really feels." "And what do you want to happen when he admits it?" Lisandro asked with that genuine curiosity he always had. I turned to face him and told the truth for the first time in a long time. For him to stop pretending he doesn't feel anything for me, and to want me for real. Not just this physical tension, but something real and official. Lisandro sighed in a way that was half amusement, half concern. "He feels much more than he admits, Mia, but he's complicated because he's a boss and has all that idiotic pride about control," he explained. "Admitting that a woman destabilizes him is practically impossible for him, but when he breaks, it's going to be intense. I'm counting on it," I said, smiling before walking away to greet other people. Dinner was served shortly after, and I immediately noticed that the seats had been arranged so that I'd be far from Vito, which had obviously been purposeful on his part, trying to maintain distance. But it didn't matter where I was sitting, because I felt his eyes on me the whole time during the entire meal, and every time I laughed or moved or picked up my wine glass, I knew he was watching every movement. "He's looking at you again," Cecilia whispered next to me, without even turning her head in her brother's direction. "I know," I murmured back, picking up my glass and drinking slowly, just to provoke a little more. "You look perfect, and the red dress is his weakness like I said," Cecilia continued, smiling. "You know how I know red is a weakness?" I shook my head, curious, and she leaned closer. "Because I'm his sister, and I know everything," she explained with that conspiratorial tone. "And because he burned his ex's photo wearing red after they broke up, and said that red is Mia's color now." My heart raced with this information because burning a photo was practically a declaration in the twisted way Vito had of showing feelings. "He burned the photo?" I asked, trying not to seem as affected as I was. "Burned it, and declared that red is only yours," Cecilia confirmed, nodding. "Like his way of declaring it in that Vito way, you know? He's impossible," I murmured, feeling my chest tighten. "And you love it," Cecilia shot back, smiling. "Yes," I finally admitted, because there was no point lying to her. When dinner finally ended, I needed air because all that tension was suffocating me, so I discreetly slipped out to the terrace, knowing I'd probably be followed, but not caring. The cool night air hit my face, and I took a deep breath, trying to organize my thoughts and understand why the hell this man affected me so much after all these years. "Running away?" Vito's husky voice came from behind me, making my entire body go on alert. I turned slowly and found him standing there watching me with that intensity that always left me breathless. "From you? Always," I responded, because provoking was safer than admitting the truth. Vito approached with slow, calculated steps like a predator circling prey. "Why? Afraid? Of you? Never," I said, lifting my chin defiantly. "I've known you since I was 12, Vito. You don't scare me one bit." I should scare you because I'm dangerous, he said, stopping right in front of me and invading all my personal space again. I laughed because that was ridiculous. For others maybe, but not for me, I said, crossing my arms. Or are you going to hurt me, Vito? The way his eyes darkened even more told me I'd hit the mark. Never, he said in a voice so low it was almost a whisper. But I could do other things to you, things that aren't exactly safe. My heart raced, but I didn't back down 1 inch. Like what? I challenged, wanting to know how far he'd go. Vito raised his hand and touched my chin surprisingly gently for someone so dangerous. And then his voice came out husky and full of promises when he spoke. Like, kiss you until you forget your name, like take you to my room and show you exactly what this dress does to me, like make you mine officially so everyone knows. My breath failed, because that was the closest thing to a confession I'd ever gotten from him. So why don't you? I asked, with my voice coming out weaker than I wanted. And that's when I saw the internal struggle happening in his eyes so visibly it even hurt. Because you're a Rossi, allied family, and your brother is my friend, he said, clenching his jaw again. And if I touch you, it changes everything. Politics and alliances. It's not simple. What if I don't care about politics? I asked, taking a step closer to him. But I care, Vito said, and there was something tired in his voice. I'm a Don, responsible for hundreds of people. I can't be selfish even if I want to. The pain I felt from those words was real, but I tried to hide it. So this is rejection? The way he suddenly grabbed my waist and pulled me against his body was answer enough. No, never, he said, looking into my eyes with so much intensity I could barely breathe. It's complicated, but Mia, he paused. Don't wear that dress again. I'm begging you because next time I can't guarantee control. I could have agreed, but instead I challenged once more. What if I do? Vito laughed without any humor and pulled me even closer until our bodies were completely pressed together. Then you find out what happens when Don Vito Genovese loses control, and it won't be gentle. I promise. Promise? I whispered, feeling my heart about to jump out of my chest. He almost kissed me, and I felt his breath brush against my lips for an infinite second. But then Vito controlled himself at the last moment and stepped back, releasing my waist. Go inside, Mia, before I do something we're not ready for, he ordered in that boss voice that didn't accept arguments. I left there with my legs shaking and completely frustrated, but at the same time more determined than ever. And when I looked back, I saw Vito alone on the terrace punching the wall while muttering something that sounded a lot like fuck. And it was in that moment that I knew with complete certainty that he felt exactly the same as I did, and that it was just a matter of time until one of us broke completely and admitted the truth that everyone already knew. That silent war between us was far from over, but I had just won the first battle with that red dress he'd begged me not to wear again, and obviously I was going to wear it, because provoking Vito Genovese until he lost control was practically my favorite sport. Chapter 2. Dress Again.
You're losing control.
And cute kids. A week after the dinner, I was in my room holding the same red dress in my hands and smiling because I knew exactly what I was about to do. And Cecilia, sitting on my bed, looked at me with that expression between amusement and disbelief that meant she thought I'd gone completely insane. Today's event was the Genovese grandmother's birthday, and half the family would be there, which obviously included Vito and his threat from a week ago, still echoing in my head about what would happen if I wore that dress again. But I was never good at following orders, especially when they came from stubborn men who pretended not to want me, so I put on the red dress again, feeling the familiar fabric hug my body, and knowing I was declaring open war against Vito Genovese's precarious self-control. Cecilia got up from the bed and came to me, shaking her head from side to side, with that huge smile she always had when I did something completely insane. "Girl, you're insane," she practically screamed, laughing and adjusting the neckline of my dress. "He warned you, like literally warned you not to wear it again, and you're going to wear it anyway." I smiled, fixing my hair and checking my makeup in the mirror, because yes, I was completely aware of what I was doing. "And I want to see what he does this time," I said, turning to face her. "Where is he? Has he already arrived at the event?" Cecilia's expression changed a little, and she made a face that immediately put me on alert. "Main hall, but Mia," she hesitated, and I knew I wasn't going to like what came next. With Annie Russo, she's glued to him again. I felt that horrible pang of jealousy pierce through my chest, but I tried to hide it because admitting jealousy was admitting I cared more than I should. "Annie?" I asked, feigning disinterest while grabbing my purse. "The widow?" "Yes. The widow who wants Vito for herself, and everyone knows it except him who's blind or pretends to be," Cecilia explained, rolling her eyes dramatically. "She's impossible, Mia. Goes to every event glued to him like she owns him." The jealousy burned stronger, but I took a deep breath and lifted my chin because I wasn't going to let Annie Russo shake me. "Great," I said. adjusting the red dress one last time. Let's go then. When we arrived at the Genovese mansion, the event was already underway, and there were at least 50 people scattered throughout the halls, decorated for the matriarch's celebration, and I swept the environment with my eyes looking for only one specific person in the middle of all those elegant people. And then I saw him in the main hall exactly where Cecilia had said he'd be, but what made me stop completely was the scene unfolding in front of me. Annie Russo was practically glued to Vito with her hand on his arm and that smile that was too sweet to be genuine, and I heard her talking about something about being alone since her husband died, and how Vito's company was special. Vito was clearly uncomfortable maintaining that polite but distant posture he used when he didn't want to be rude, but also wasn't interested. And when I saw Annie touch his chest, something inside me just exploded. "Annie, you have family and friends, you're not alone," Vito said in that controlled voice while removing her hand from his chest, gently but very firmly. "But I want your company specifically, Vito," Annie insisted, touching him again. "You're special, and That's when I entered the hall and Vito saw me, and the entire world seemed to stop in that moment, because he simply froze completely. His eyes traveled over the red dress I was wearing again, and his jaw locked in that way that meant he was trying not to lose control in front of everyone, and I saw his hands close into fists at his sides while those dark eyes pierced through me across the room. Annie noticed the change in him, and followed his gaze to me, and the way her face contorted in poorly disguised hatred told me everything I needed to know about what she thought of me. "Her again," Annie murmured with venom in her voice. "That Rossi girl always calling attention." Vito's voice came out cold and dangerous in a way I rarely heard, and even from far away I felt the power in his words. "Careful, Annie. Very careful," he said, without taking his eyes off me. "You speak about Mia with respect. You're defending her?" Annie asked, surprised, turning to look at him. "Always," Vito responded simply before starting to walk in my direction, leaving Annie alone and clearly humiliated in the middle of the hall. My heart raced when he approached with that expression that mixed fury and something much more dangerous, and before I could say anything, he grabbed my arm and pulled me into the empty hallway, away from everyone's curious eyes. His touch burned on my skin, and I felt that familiar electricity run through my entire body as he gently pressed me against the hallway wall. "Hi, Vito," I said, with my voice coming out more provocative than it should. "Like the dress?" The way his eyes darkened even more told me that "like" was a huge understatement. "I warned you," he growled in that husky voice that did absurd things to me. "Told you not to wear it again." I crossed my arms and smiled in that way I knew drove him crazy. "And I don't take orders, especially yours," I shot back, lifting my chin. "And who's Annie? New girlfriend?" Something flashed in his eyes that looked a lot like satisfaction that I was jealous. "No, nothing. She's annoying and clingy," he said, taking a step closer. "Are you jealous?" "No," I protested too quickly. "Why would I be jealous?" "You're not mine." Vito moved even closer, completely invading my personal space and making my heart race. "And you're not mine," he said with his voice coming out dangerously low. "But you wear this dress to provoke me. Admit it." There was no point lying when he already knew the truth. "I admit it," I said, smiling. "And it worked. You're here irritated and losing control. Mission accomplished." Vito laughed without any humor and shook his head in a way that was half exasperation, half admiration. "You're impossible," he murmured, before doing something completely unexpected that left me speechless. He took off his blazer and put it around my shoulders, wrapping my entire body and covering the red dress completely. "You wear this the rest of the night without taking it off." I looked at the huge blazer that practically swallowed me and then back at him. "What if I take it off?" I challenged, because apparently I didn't know when to stop. Vito's eyes got so dark they looked black, and his voice came out husky and full of promises when he answered. "Then I take you to my room and show you exactly what you do to me, and you don't leave until I'm done. Understood?" My heart practically stopped, and I felt heat rise through my entire body at those words loaded with intention. "Understood," I whispered, because suddenly I'd forgotten how to form complete sentences. Vito nodded once and left the hallway, leaving me alone, and completely breathless with his blazer still warm on my shoulders, and smelling of masculine cologne that was unmistakably his. "He's impossible," I murmured to myself, but I didn't take off the blazer because some part of me loved being wrapped in something of his. After a few minutes trying to recover my composure, I went out to the garden needing fresh air, and that's when I heard those high-pitched and excited voices that always made me smile. Sophia and Marco, Vito's 4- and 6-year-old nephew and niece, came running in my direction with that infinite energy that only small children possess. "Aunt Mia, you came!" Sophia screamed, throwing herself into my arms, and I knelt down to hug the 2 children I loved like they were mine. Of course I came, sweetie, I said, squeezing them against me. I wouldn't miss great-grandma's birthday for anything. Marco looked at me with those curious eyes that were so similar to Vito's, it hurt. Uncle Vito is grumpy today, he said with that childish innocence. Why? I laughed quietly because these children had no idea what they were talking about. Uncle Vito is always grumpy, sweetie. It's part of his personality. But he smiles when you're around, Sophia declared with so much certainty it caught me by surprise. Like, he never smiles, but with you he smiles. Marco nodded, agreeing enthusiastically. It's true. And he told Daddy that you're the most beautiful woman he's ever seen. I heard it. My heart stopped completely, and I looked at Marco, trying to process what he'd just said. He said that? I asked, with my voice coming out weaker than I wanted. Yes, Sophia confirmed, jumping excitedly. And he said he's going to marry you one day. I heard that too. I felt my entire world spin with that innocent revelation. I think you guys heard wrong, sweethearts. I tried to argue, but my voice didn't sound very convincing. No, we didn't, Marco insisted, crossing his little arms. Daddy laughed and said, then ask her already. And Uncle Vito turned red. The image of Vito Genovese turning red was so rare and precious I could barely believe it. Interesting, I murmured, trying not to show how much that affected me. Sophia, Marco, let Aunt Mia breathe. Vito's deep voice came from behind me, making my entire body go on alert again. The children turned to look at him with those huge smiles. But we love Aunt Mia, Sophia protested. Vito looked at me, and something passed through his eyes that made my stomach flip. I know. I do too, he said, and then seemed to realize what he'd just admitted in front of everyone. I mean, the family does too. Come on, kids. Great-grandma wants a photo. He took the children by their hands, but before leaving looked at me one last time with that intensity that always left me breathless, and that look carried so many unspoken promises that I felt my entire body tremble. When they finally left, I stood there alone in the garden, trying to process everything that had just happened. He loves me, I whispered to myself, touching the blazer still on my shoulders. The kid said it, and he admitted it. Like, in his twisted way, but he admitted it. And for the first time in all these years of provocations and tension, I felt an absolute certainty that Vito Genovese felt exactly the same as I did. He just needed a bigger push to finally admit it head-on, without hiding behind excuses about politics and responsibilities. That silent war between us had just gained a new chapter, and I was more determined than ever to win. The red dress had worked perfectly again, and his blazer on my shoulders was like a silent declaration of ownership. And when I returned to the hall and saw Annie glaring at me, I simply smiled because I knew I'd won that battle without even needing to fight. Vito had defended me in front of her, had covered me with his blazer, and had practically admitted he loved me to his nephew and niece even without realizing it. Cecilia appeared at my side with that huge conspiratorial smile. You're wearing his blazer, she observed clearly, loving every second of it. He made me, I said, but couldn't hide the smile. He marked you, Cecilia corrected. Everyone here knows whose blazer that is and what it means that you're wearing it. She nudged me lightly. You won, girl. He's completely crazy about you even though he's too stubborn to fully admit it. And when I looked across the hall and found Vito's eyes watching me with that possessive intensity while Annie tried to talk to him again, I knew Cecilia was right. That provocation with the red dress had unleashed something that neither of us could stop now, and I was just beginning to discover how far Vito Genovese was willing to go to have me. The night continued, and I kept his blazer on my shoulders the whole time like a trophy, and every time our eyes met across the crowded hall, I felt that electricity run through my entire body, reminding me of his threat about taking me to his room if I took off the blazer, and some wild part of me wanted to take it off just to see if he'd actually keep his promise, but I still had a little bit of self-control left. For now. Chapridi. Love sometimes kills self-control, doesn't it? Our protagonist is suffering from that, apparently. Chapter 3. Annie attacks and best friend.
You can't tell me what to do!
You can't tell what to do. Enough. She's mine.
A few days after Grandma's event, I was sitting in a charming cafe downtown with Cecilia across from me, and she had that expression on her face that meant she was about to drop a bomb about something involving her brother. The truth is that since that night with the red dress and Vito's blazer, I hadn't seen him in person, but Cecilia always had updates because she was incapable of keeping quiet when it came to her brother's non-existent love life. Annie is impossible, Mia, Cecilia finally said after ordering her coffee. She goes to every event and stays glued to Vito like she owns him, and he rejects her, but she never gives up. I stirred my coffee, trying to seem disinterested, even though I felt that familiar pang of jealousy burning in my chest. Not my problem, I said, shrugging. He can do whatever he wants. Cecilia looked at me with that expression that clearly said she wasn't buying my fake indifference. You're jealous, she declared, pointing her finger at me accusingly. I'm not, I protested too quickly to be convincing. You are, Cecilia laughed, shaking her head. And look, I love it because Vito is jealous too. She leaned closer with that conspiratorial smile. When you talked to that capo Benedetto at the last dinner, Vito exploded afterward and said Benedetto couldn't get near his Mia. My heart raced, and I almost dropped my cup. His Mia? I repeated, feeling heat rise up my face. Exactly, Cecilia confirmed excitedly. He's possessive. He just won't admit it head on. She paused and her expression got more serious. But Mia, Annie is a real viper. She talked badly about you yesterday to my mom. Anger replaced jealousy instantly. She said what? I asked, leaning forward. Said you're desperate and classless. Cecilia responded, rolling her eyes. And Mom defended you immediately. Said you're practically family, and that Annie should focus on being a dignified widow instead of husband hunting. It was epic. I laughed despite the situation, because Cecilia's mom had always been amazing to me. I love your mom, I said sincerely. She loves you too, Cecilia smiled, taking my hand. We all love you, Mia. Your family even without the official paperwork. She squeezed my hand. Just need to make it official with a ring and wedding, and Vito admitting he's completely crazy about you. Maybe someday, I murmured. But deep down I knew I wanted much more than maybe. That same night there was a business dinner at the Genovese mansion, and I went with Levi because my brother needed to discuss some commercial alliances with Vito, and when we arrived, the hall was already full of powerful men and their wives talking about politics and money. I swept the environment looking for Vito and found him near the bar talking with some associates, but before I could approach, I saw Annie Russo walking straight toward him with that determination that instantly made me tense. I watched from afar while Annie simply sat down next to Vito without being invited, and the way she touched his arm possessively made my hand grip the wine glass with dangerous force. I couldn't hear what they were talking about from that distance, but I could see the body language, and Vito was clearly uncomfortable, subtly moving away from her touches. Vito, can we talk later in private? Annie asked loud enough for me to hear now that I'd discreetly moved closer. About what? Vito responded in that polite but distant voice. About us and our future, Annie said, touching his hand. I know you need a wife, a Donna, and I'd be perfect for that. She leaned closer. Allied families, experience, and I want you so much. Vito removed her hand gently but very firmly, and my heart raced seeing him reject her. Annie, I don't want you, he said with brutal clarity. I respect you as an ally, but there is not, and never will be, an us. Between us, I saw tears appear in Annie's eyes, but they seemed too fake to be genuine. Because of her? Annie asked with venom in her voice. Because of that Rossi girl? She's nothing, just a cheap attention seeker calling for attention. The temperature around Vito seemed to drop several degrees, and his voice came out cold and dangerous in a way I rarely heard. Careful, Annie. Very careful, he said, turning completely to face her. Mia is important to me and to the family, and if you speak about her disrespectfully again, the alliance with the Russos ends. Understood? Annie visibly paled because threatening to end an alliance wasn't a joke in our world. Understood. Sorry, she murmured before practically running away from him, completely humiliated. I stood there frozen, processing the fact that Vito had just threatened an entire family alliance because of me, and my heart was beating so fast I could barely breathe. Lisandro appeared next to his brother, laughing quietly, in a way that meant he'd seen and heard everything, and I moved a little closer to hear their conversation without being too obvious. Bro, you're pathetic, Lisandro said, shaking his head with that huge smile. Just admit you love her already. Shut up, Vito responded, but didn't sound very convincing. You just threatened an alliance because of her. Lisandro continued, crossing his arms. That's practically a public declaration. Vito ran his hand through his hair in that frustrated gesture he always made when he was losing control. It's respect. Mia deserves respect, he argued, but even I could hear there was much more than respect involved. And love, Lisandro shot back, getting more serious. Your love that you deny out of idiotic pride. He took a step closer to his brother. You love her. She loves you. Everyone knows it except you two who are too stubborn to admit it. It's not pride, Vito said with his voice coming out tired. It's complicated. It's not complicated, Lisandro practically yelled, exasperated. You're creating complications that don't exist. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice had a warning tone. But bro, you're going to lose her if you don't act soon. I saw Vito tense at those words. She's not going anywhere, he said, but sounded less certain than he probably wanted. She's not? Lisandro questioned, raising an eyebrow. Miguel Torres has been looking at her lately, and he doesn't have your imaginary complications about politics and alliances. The way Vito's jaw locked, and his hands closed into fists, told me the mention of Miguel had hit exactly where Lisandro wanted. Miguel doesn't touch her, Vito growled with so much possessiveness in his voice. I felt a shiver run down my spine. Then you touch her, Lisandro said simply, before he tries, and you lose the only woman you've ever truly loved. I moved away, before they could see me there listening to everything, and walked to the terrace needing fresh air to process everything I'd just witnessed and heard. Vito had defended my honor in front of Annie, had threatened to end an alliance because of me, and Lisandro had practically confirmed that his brother loved me, even though Vito was still too stubborn to admit it out loud. Cecilia appeared at my side a few minutes later with 2 glasses of wine in her hands. "Did you see the show in there?" she asked, handing me one of the glasses. "I did," I responded, drinking the wine in one gulp. "He threatened the Russo alliance because of me. Because he loves you," Cecilia said, as if it were the most obvious fact in the world. "And everyone knows it except him who's an idiot." She leaned on the railing next to me. "But Miguel Torres really does have his eye on you. I saw him asking about you to some people." The mention of Miguel made me frown, because he was Vito's rival, and any interest from him in me couldn't be for pure reasons. "Miguel is dangerous," I said, shaking my head. "And Vito's rival. He probably wants to use me to get to the Genovese family." "Probably," Cecilia agreed. "But he's also handsome and powerful and interested. So if Vito doesn't act soon, you could consider other options just to give him that final push." I laughed, because the idea of using Miguel to make Vito jealous was tempting, but also extremely dangerous. "I'm not going to play with fire like that," I said firmly. "Miguel is no joke, and I don't want to start a war between families." "But you want Vito," Cecilia observed, looking at me with those eyes that saw much more than I'd like to admit. "I do," I confessed, finally letting the vulnerability show. "But I don't know what else to do to make him admit he wants me too. I've tried everything." Cecilia hugged me from the side and rested her head on my shoulder. "He'll admit it, girl. He just needs the right push," she said with conviction. "And when he finally breaks, it's going to be intense and worth all the waiting." We stayed there in silence for a few minutes, enjoying the night and the wine, and then I heard footsteps behind us, and my entire body went on alert, knowing instinctively who it was before even turning around. Cecilia gave me a conspiratorial smile and whispered "good luck" before leaving me alone on the terrace. And when I finally turned around, I found Vito standing there watching me with that intensity that always left me breathless. "You heard the conversation with Lisandro," he said, and it wasn't a question but a statement. "I did," I admitted, because there was no point lying. "And I heard you defending my honor with Annie too." Vito took a few steps in my direction with that predatory posture. "She had no right to talk about you that way," he said, with his voice still carrying remnants of that dangerous coldness. "No one does. You threatened to end an alliance because of me," I said, feeling my heart race as he got closer and closer. "I did," Vito confirmed, stopping right in front of me and completely invading my personal space. "And I'd do it again without hesitation, because you're worth more than any political alliance." Those words hit me with so much force I almost forgot how to breathe. "Vito," I started but didn't know how to finish the sentence. "Miguel Torres is interested in you," he said, changing the subject abruptly, and his jaw locked with that familiar tension. "Lisandro warned me." "So what?" I asked, lifting my chin defiantly, even knowing I was provoking something dangerous. "You don't have the right to have an opinion about who shows interest in me." The way his eyes darkened told me I'd hit exactly the right nerve. "I don't have the right?" he repeated with his voice coming out low and dangerous. "So you're considering his attention?" I could have denied it, but some masochistic part of me wanted to push him to the limit. "What if I am?" I challenged, knowing I was playing with fire. "You yourself said it's complicated between us, so maybe I should look for someone less complicated." Vito closed the distance between us so fast, I didn't even have time to react, and suddenly I was pressed against the terrace railing with his body practically glued to mine. "You're not looking for anyone," he growled with so much possessiveness. I felt my entire body tremble, especially not Miguel Torres, who only wants you to get to me. "So what do you suggest?" I asked, looking straight into his dark eyes. "That I wait eternally for you to decide if I'm important enough to risk your complicated political alliances." The pain that passed through his eyes was quick but real. "You're the most important thing that exists to me," Vito said with his voice coming out husky and full of emotion. "But I need time to solve things the right way." "How much time?" I asked, feeling tears threaten to appear. "Because I can't stay in this limbo forever, Vito." He raised his hand and touched my face with a gentleness that completely contrasted with the tension in his body. "Soon," he promised, looking into my eyes. "I promise I'll solve everything soon, and then you'll be mine officially, without any complications." I wanted to believe him, but years of waiting had left me skeptical. "And in the meantime, I just wait?" I asked, with my voice coming out weaker than I wanted. "In the meantime, you trust me," Vito said, bringing his face close to mine until our breaths mixed. "And don't let Miguel Torres or any other man get close because you're mine, even though I haven't put my ring on your finger yet." And before I could respond, he pulled away, leaving me there alone, trembling and completely confused about what the hell had just happened. And when I looked back, I saw him standing in the terrace doorway watching me with that possessive intensity that clearly said he wasn't going to let anyone have me, even though he was too stubborn to claim me completely. That night had changed something fundamental between us, and I knew the silent war was coming to an end. It remained to be seen who would break first, and finally admit the truth everyone had known for years. Chapter 4. Maya helps Lisandro and Miguel appears a few days after the dinner.
I don't belong to you.
Fine. You okay?
Where I saw Annie get humiliated and heard that whole conversation about Miguel Torres. I was in my apartment thinking about how to help someone who always helped me, and that's when I had the perfect idea that made me grab my phone and call Lisandro. He answered on the second ring with that excited voice he always used when talking to me, and I smiled because Lisandro Genovese was genuinely one of the best people I knew in that world, full of dangers and betrayals. "Liz, I have a gift for you," I said as soon as he answered. "A gift?" Lisandro asked, and I could hear the curiosity in his voice. "What kind of gift?" "Like a beautiful, smart, and funny woman who's my friend," I explained, smiling because I knew he'd love it. "She's a photographer, and I think you two would get along really well. Want to meet her?" Lisandro laughed on the other end of the line in a genuinely surprised way. "You're setting me up on a date?" he asked, still laughing. "Mia Rossi is playing Cupid." "Yes," I confirmed excitedly, "because you're my favorite Genovese and you deserve someone really nice. Not those gold diggers who only show up because of the last name and money." There was a silence on the other end, and when Lisandro spoke again, his voice was loaded with genuine emotion. "That's why you're my favorite. Seriously," he said sincerely. "Cece is my sister, and I love her, but after her, you're the family's chosen one." He paused. "And does Vito know I'm your favorite Genovese?" I laughed, shaking my head even knowing he couldn't see me. "He doesn't know. And you're not going to tell him," I warned. "He gets jealous of everything." "Great. Then I'm definitely telling him," Lisandro responded with that mischievous amusement tone. "But back to the subject, yes. Introduce me to your friend. Let's have dinner next week." "Perfect," I practically screamed excitedly. "She's going to love you, I promise." A week later, we were all sitting in an elegant restaurant downtown, and I watched with satisfaction as Lisandro and Luna talked animatedly on the other side of the table, and the chemistry between the two of them was so obvious that even Levi next to me had commented on how they seemed made for each other. Luna was really perfect for Lisandro with that free and creative way of hers that contrasted perfectly with the structured world of the Mafia, and seeing my friend smiling in that genuine way made me feel like I'd done something really good. "She's perfect, thank you," Lisandro whispered to me when Luna and Levi were distracted talking about photography. "Seriously? Thank you so much for this." "You're welcome," I responded, smiling. "Now you owe me one." Lisandro looked at me with that serious expression that rarely appeared on his face. "What do you want?" he asked, leaning closer. I took a deep breath, because what I was going to ask was important. "Tell your brother he's an idiot," I said, looking straight into his eyes, "and that I'm tired of waiting." Lisandro's expression changed to something between concern and surprise. "Are you going to give up on him?" he asked with his voice low to not draw the others' attention. The pain I felt from that question was real and intense. "Maybe," I admitted, feeling my chest tighten. "If he doesn't act soon, I can't stay stuck in maybe forever. It's not fair to me." Lisandro was silent for a few seconds, processing my words, and then nodded with determination. "I'll talk to him," he promised, holding my hand. "I promise I'll make my idiot brother see reason before it's too late." Dinner continued pleasantly with lots of laughter and interesting conversations, and when we finally finished and left the restaurant, I was feeling lighter than I'd felt in weeks. Levi had gone to get the car, leaving Luna and me talking on the sidewalk about setting up another get-together for the four of us, and that's when I heard that voice that instantly made me tense. "Mia Rossi, finally alone," Miguel Torres said, appearing out of nowhere and blocking my path on the sidewalk. I looked at him, feeling all my self-preservation instincts screaming that this man was dangerous. "Miguel," I said, keeping my voice neutral, "what do you want?" Miguel smiled in that way that probably worked with other women, but only made me uncomfortable. "To talk," he said, taking a step closer. "You're interesting, beautiful, and completely wasted on Vito Genovese." The mention of Vito made me lift my chin defensively. "I'm not Vito's," I said, even knowing it was a lie. "No?" Miguel asked, raising an eyebrow with interest. "So you're available to have dinner with me?" Before I could answer, Levi appeared at my side with that protective expression he always had when it came to me. "She's not available for you, never will be," Levi said with a firm voice, looking directly at Miguel. "Let's go, Mia." Miguel laughed in a way that had no real humor. "Overprotective as always, Levi," he said, but then looked at me, ignoring my brother completely. "But Mia is an adult and can choose for herself, can't she?" He took a card from his pocket and held it out to me. "Think about dinner. My number's on there. I took the card more from reflex than real interest, and Miguel walked away with that irritating confidence of someone who thinks they got what they wanted. Levi immediately turned to me with that expression between irritation and concern that meant I was going to hear a lecture. "You're not going to call him," Levi said, and it wasn't a question, but a clear order. "I won't," I agreed, putting the card in my purse anyway. "But it's good to have options in case Vito never—" I let the sentence die, because I couldn't finish it out loud. Levi held my shoulders, turning me to face him directly. "He will, Mia. Trust me," he said with so much conviction I almost believed it. "He just needs the right push." "And who's going to give that push?" I asked, with my voice coming out tired of this whole situation. "Me," Levi responded with determination. "And Lisandro, and the whole family, because everyone is tired of this ridiculous dance between you two." He pulled me into a hug. "Vito loves you. He's just too much of an idiot to admit it yet, but that's going to change soon." I held on to my brother, feeling all the emotions I'd been holding back for so long, threatening to overflow. "What if it doesn't change?" I whispered, afraid to actually consider that possibility. "What if he really can never overcome the political complications and chooses duty over me?" Levi pushed me back a little to look at my face. "Then you move on and find someone who chooses you without hesitation," he said firmly. "But it won't come to that because I've known Vito for years, and I know he'd rather die than truly lose you." He wiped a tear that had escaped from my eye. "Just need a little more patience, sis." We went back to the car in silence, and the whole way home I kept thinking about Miguel Torres and the card that was in my purse, and about Vito Genovese and all the unfulfilled promises that existed between us. The truth is, I had no real interest in Miguel, because my heart had completely belonged to Vito for years, but some part of me wondered if using Miguel to make Vito jealous would be the final push he needed. But then I remembered that Miguel was dangerous and a rival of the Genovese family, and that playing with him could start a war I didn't want to be responsible for starting. So I put the card at the bottom of the drawer when I got home and tried to forget that option existed. Lisandro had promised to talk to Vito, and Levi also said he'd give a push, so maybe finally things would start moving in the right direction. That night, lying in bed, I grabbed my phone and looked at the unanswered messages I'd sent to Vito in the last few days, and his lack of response hurt more than I wanted to admit. He'd been avoiding seeing me in person since that conversation on the terrace, and I didn't know if that was good or bad, if it meant he was solving those complications, or if he was simply running from having to make a real decision. Cecilia had sent me a message earlier saying that Vito had been impossible the last few days, and that he'd practically thrown Annie Russo out of the mansion when she showed up uninvited again, and knowing he was at least keeping other women away gave me some comfort, even if it wasn't enough. I wanted more than him simply not being with other people. I wanted him to be with me for real, and officially without more excuses or complications. Miguel's card in my drawer seemed to burn a hole in the furniture, and I knew it was dangerous to even have kept it, but some rebellious part of me liked knowing I had options, even though I had no real intention of using them. Vito needed to know he couldn't keep me in limbo forever waiting while he decided if I was worth risking his precious political alliances, and maybe knowing Miguel was interested would be exactly the push Lisandro and Levi were planning to give. I fell asleep that night, dreaming of intense dark eyes and unfulfilled promises, and woke up determined to not let anyone else control my destiny, including Vito Genovese with all his stubbornness and pride. If he really wanted me, he'd have to prove it with actions, and not just empty words about solving things soon, because I'd waited years, and my patience was finally running out. Chapter 5. Vito finds out about Miguel and explodes.
Lisandro!
Lisandro. He touched her?
Lisandro walked into Vito's office with that serious expression that rarely appeared on his face, and I knew that when my younger brother got like this, it was because there was some bomb about to explode. Vito was sitting behind the huge desk reviewing some business documents when Lisandro closed the door behind him harder than necessary, and the way Vito slowly raised his eyes told me he also noticed something was wrong. "I need to tell you something," Lisandro said, without beating around the bush, walking to the desk and planting his hands on the wooden surface. "And you're not going to like it one bit." Vito leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms with that defensive posture he always assumed when preparing for bad news. "Talk," he ordered, with his voice too controlled to be natural. Lisandro took a deep breath before dropping the bomb that I knew would make my brother explode. "Miguel Torres approached Mia," he said carefully, watching Vito's reaction. "Offered dinner and gave her his number." The reaction was instantaneous and explosive, in a way Lisandro probably expected, but still made him take a step back. Vito got up from the chair so fast it fell backward, hitting the floor with a crash, and the absolute fury that took over his face was scary even for me, who was used to seeing my brother in moments of rage. "He did what?" Vito roared with his hands closed in fists, so tight his knuckles turned white. That son of a bitch had the audacity to approach her? Calm down, Vito, Lisandro said, raising his hands in a placating gesture, even knowing calm was the last thing his brother felt at that moment. Levi interfered before anything happened, and she didn't accept the invitation. He paused, letting the weight of the next words become clear. But she thought about accepting it, and you know why? Because you don't do anything, and she's tired of waiting. Vito started pacing back and forth in the office like a caged lion trying to process that information. She can't accept anything from Miguel, he said, with his voice still loaded with fury, but now also with something that looked a lot like panic. Miguel is a rival. He's dangerous. He only wants her to get to me. And you're an idiot who won't commit, Lisandro practically yelled, losing patience with his brother's stubbornness. Mia loves you, Vito. Everyone knows it except you who pretends not to see. He took a step closer. But she can't wait forever, while you decide if she's worth risking your precious political alliances. The pain that passed across Vito's face was quick, but real, and he stopped pacing, becoming completely still in the middle of the office. It's not about her being worth it, Vito said, with his voice coming out lower and loaded with emotion. She's worth everything. It's about me not wanting to destroy her life with my world. Lisandro shook his head with exasperation. You have a choice now, and it's simple, he said, crossing his arms. Either you claim her now, officially and without more excuses, or you lose her to Miguel or any other man who has the courage to try. He let those words penetrate before continuing. Because she's incredible, Vito, and men are going to try to win her over while you stand there paralyzed by fear. The terror that appeared in Vito's eyes when actually considering losing Mia was so intense, even Lisandro seemed affected by it. What do I do? Vito asked, and there was a vulnerability in his voice that rarely appeared. How do I fix this? You admit what you feel, Lisandro responded firmly. You talk to Levi. Ask for formal permission like traditions demand. Date her officially. Marry her eventually. Make her yours in every way possible before it's too late. Vito ran his hand through his hair in that frustrated gesture he made when struggling internally with something difficult. What if Levi says no? He asked with real fear in his voice. What if he thinks I'm not good enough for his sister? He won't say no, Lisandro assured with conviction. Levi respects you and has seen how you look at Mia for years. He just wants you to be serious about her and not treat it like some passing fling. I am serious, Vito said immediately. With so much certainty, there was no room for doubt. I've always been serious about her since the moment I realized that annoying girl had grown up and become the most incredible woman I've ever met. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was loaded with vulnerability. I was just scared. Lisandro approached his brother with that gentler expression. Scared of what, Vito? He asked with genuine curiosity. Scared of what, specifically? Vito turned, looking out the office window, as if the words were easier to say without having to face his brother. Of not being good enough for her, he admitted with his voice low. Of my world eventually destroying her, of losing her the same way I lost our father, or how I almost lost you in that attack 2 years ago. He took a deep breath. I thought I was protecting her by not touching her, keeping my distance. But now I realize I was just being a coward. Not a coward, Lisandro corrected, placing his hand on his brother's shoulder. Just scared. And that's human. He squeezed Vito's shoulder. But maybe touching her is the only way to really protect her, keeping her close where you can see her and make sure she's safe. The way Vito's eyes lit up with that realization told me something had finally clicked in his stubborn head. Exactly, he murmured more to himself than to Lisandro. If she's close, with me, officially mine, then I can truly protect her. He turned, facing his brother. Miguel wouldn't have approached if she was already marked as mine. So go, Lisandro said urgently. Talk to Levi today now, before you lose your courage, or come up with more excuses to delay. Vito nodded with that determination I knew well, the one that appeared when he finally made an important decision. You're right, he said, already walking toward the door. I'm going to Levi now and asking for formal permission to date Mia, and if he accepts, I'm not wasting any more time with imaginary complications. Lisandro smiled, seeing his brother finally act after years of hesitation. And when are you going to talk to her? He asked curiously. How are you going to fix years of rejection and complications? Vito stopped with his hand on the doorknob, and a small smile appeared on his face. I'm going to do it the way she deserves, he responded with conviction. I'm going to be honest about my fears. I'm going to admit I was an idiot, and I'm going to promise to never put her in second place again because of politics or duty. He opened the door. And then I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving she made the right choice waiting for me. When Vito left the office with that renewed determination, Lisandro stood there alone smiling, because he knew things were finally moving in the right direction after years of frustrated dancing between the two stubborn people. The fear of Miguel Torres having approached Mia had been exactly the push Vito needed to overcome his own fears and insecurities, and now it only remained to wait to see how Levi would react to the formal request. But Lisandro was certain Levi would say yes, because anyone with eyes could see that Vito and Mia were made for each other, and that this love had only been delayed by pride and fear, but never really denied. Now the moment had finally come to stop running and start building something real, and Lisandro couldn't be happier to have been the catalyst that forced that necessary change. Chapter 6. Vito asks permission and Amia finds out.
Go. It's time.
Vito parked in front of the Rossi office with his heart beating faster than it beat before any dangerous negotiation or armed confrontation, and the irony of being more nervous to ask permission to date a woman than to face rivals didn't go unnoticed by him. He took a deep breath, adjusting his suit before getting out of the car and walking with determination to the building entrance. And each step seemed to weigh more than the previous one because he knew this conversation was going to change everything. Levi was in his office when Vito entered after being announced by the secretary, and the way his friend looked up from the documents with that small smile that clearly said he already knew the reason for the visit made Vito stop for a second. There was no surprise on Levi's face, just something that looked a lot like satisfaction mixed with a hint of amusement, and Vito realized that probably half the family had been waiting for this moment for years. "Levi, we need to talk," Vito said, closing the door behind him and staying standing because sitting seemed wrong for this conversation. "About Mia." Levi leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms with that smile widening. "Finally," he said, shaking his head. "I thought you'd never have the courage to come here." The way Levi said that without any surprise confirmed that everyone really had been waiting, and Vito felt a mixture of relief and shame for having taken so long to do what was obvious to everyone. "I want your sister," Vito began with his voice firm, even though he felt his hands sweating. "I want to date her officially, and eventually marry her, and I came to ask your formal permission as family traditions demand." Levi was silent for a few seconds, just studying Vito with those eyes that saw much more than people expected. "Why?" he finally asked, leaning forward. "Why now after all these years?" The question was fair, and Vito knew he deserved a completely honest answer without the excuses he'd used for so long. "Because I was a coward," he admitted, feeling the weight of that confession. "I was afraid of not being good enough for her, of my world eventually hurting her, of losing her the same way I lost my father." He paused, taking a deep breath. "But Miguel approached her and I realized that if I don't protect her by keeping her close, other men will try, and the idea of losing her to anyone else is unbearable." Vito took another step toward Levi's desk, letting all his vulnerability show. "I love her, Levi," he said, and those words came out easier than he expected. "I've always loved her since she was 18 and I was 24. I waited for her to grow up and mature, but now I can't wait anymore." The silence that followed was heavy, and Vito felt each second like an eternity, while Levi processed everything he'd just admitted. And then finally, his friend spoke in that serious voice that carried the weight of a protector. "You hurt her and I'll kill you," Levi said without beating around the bush. "Friend or not, Mafia brother or not, if you make my sister suffer, I'll end you." The threat was real, and Vito accepted it completely. "Never," he promised, looking straight into Levi's eyes. "I'd rather die than hurt her on purpose." Levi studied his face for a few more seconds, looking for any sign of lies or hesitation, and then finally nodded slowly. "Okay, you have my permission," he said, but raised his hand before Vito could thank him. "But Vito, she's proud, and you rejected her several times with your excuses about political complications." He stood up, coming to Vito. "She might resist and make you suffer first before accepting anything you offer." The truth of those words hit Vito, because he knew he deserved any resistance Mia showed. "I deserve to suffer," he said simply, "for making her wait so long." A genuine smile appeared on Levi's face for the first time in the conversation. "Good, because she's going to make you suffer anyway," he said, patting Vito on the shoulder. "But deep down she loves you, so fight for her for real and win. I'll win or die trying," Vito promised, with all the determination he possessed. While that historic conversation was happening at the Rossi office, on the other side of the city, I was in my apartment completely oblivious to everything until Cecilia burst through the door, without even knocking, with that expression of someone who just won the lottery. I was on the couch reading a book when she practically flew on top of me, knocking the book to the floor and grabbing my shoulders with so much force it hurt. "Girl!" Cecilia practically screamed, jumping in place. Vito went to Levi. He asked permission to officially date you. My entire world stopped in that second, and I looked at Cecilia trying to process the words she just said. He did what? I asked, with my voice coming out weak, because this couldn't be real. Yes, Cecilia confirmed, shaking my shoulders. And Levi accepted. Now Vito's going to look for you to ask officially or declare or whatever he's going to do. The mixture of emotions that hit me was so intense, I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Because yes, I was happy, but I was also angry in a way that surprised even myself. After years making me wait, he decides now? I asked, feeling the anger grow. Because Miguel showed up? Cecilia made a face, because she knew I had a valid point. Well, yes, jealousy worked as a push, she admitted, letting go of my shoulders. But Mia... So he only wants me because another man wanted me first, I interrupted, getting up from the couch and starting to pace back and forth. Not because he actually feels something genuine for me? No, Cecilia protested, coming after me. He always wanted you, always loved you. He was just too much of an idiot to act. She grabbed me by the arm, making me stop. Miguel was just the final push he needed to overcome his fear. I took a deep breath, trying to organize all the conflicting feelings competing inside me. I don't know if I should make it easy for him or make him suffer first, I admitted, looking at my best friend. A huge smile appeared on Cecilia's face. Suffering, definitely suffering, she said with conviction. He deserves to pay for making you wait so long. She paused. But not too much suffering because you love him and he loves you, and everyone wants you two together, including Sophia and Marco, who ask every day when Uncle Vito is going to marry Aunt Mia. The mention of the children made me smile despite all the confusion. Those kids, I murmured, shaking my head. They're pure and they're right, Cecilia said, smiling. Now the important question, what are you going to do when he finally asks you? I thought about that for a few seconds, imagining Vito finally admitting everything I'd wanted to hear for years. I'll see, I said slowly, depending on how he asks and if it seems genuine or just a reaction to jealousy over Miguel. Cecilia hugged me tight. Whatever your decision is, I support you, she said in my ear. But for what it's worth, my brother loves you like crazy and is terrified of losing you. So at least hear what he has to say. And as I stood there in my best friend's arms, some part of me already knew that when Vito finally came to talk to me, I'd probably give in because years of love didn't disappear because of wounded pride. But that didn't mean I was going to make it easy for him after everything I'd been through waiting. And now, will Vito Genovese be able to prove he really deserves her? Chapter 7. The Ask and Resistance.
Date me.
Officially. Yes.
The Genovese Gala was the most important event of the year, and all the Mafia elite was present that night, and I'd chosen a long, elegant black dress that was completely different from the provocative red dresses I normally wore because something inside me wanted to show I'd matured beyond provocations. The fabric flowed over my body in a sophisticated way, marking my curves subtly but devastatingly, and when I entered the main hall of the Genovese mansion, I felt several eyes turn to me, but I looked for only one specific pair of eyes. Vito was on the other side of the hall talking with some associates, but the moment he saw me, he simply stopped mid-sentence, and the way those dark eyes traveled over every inch of my body with a hungry intensity told me everything I needed to know about the effect I still had on him. But this time I didn't walk toward him provocatively. Instead, I turned and went to greet other people, because if he wanted to talk to me after asking Levi's permission, then he'd have to come to me. The night passed slowly, and I felt Vito's eyes following me throughout the hall. And every time our eyes met, I saw that determination grow on his face, mixed with something that looked a lot like nervousness. Cecilia appeared at my side at one point, whispering that her brother was practically going crazy, trying to find the right moment to approach me. And that gave me a perverse satisfaction, knowing that finally, it was him who was anxious, and not me. After hours of avoiding being alone, I finally went out to the terrace needing fresh air, and it didn't take even 2 minutes to hear the familiar footsteps behind me that made my heart race despite every attempt to stay cold. I turned slowly, and found Vito standing there watching me with that vulnerable expression that rarely appeared on his always controlled face, and for the first time in all these years, he seemed genuinely insecure about how I'd react. "Mia, we need to talk," he said, with his voice coming out lower than normal. I crossed my arms, keeping my expression neutral, even though I felt my heart racing. "About what?" I asked, with my voice deliberately cold. Vito took a few steps in my direction, stopping at a respectful distance as if afraid to invade my space without permission. "About us. About everything." He began running his hand through his hair in that frustrated gesture. "I was an idiot for years, I rejected you. I pulled back whenever things got intense, said it was complicated when really I was just scared. He paused, and the pain in his eyes was visible. And I hurt you. I know I hurt you. The confirmation of what I already knew still hurt to hear out loud. Yes, you hurt me, I admitted, feeling my throat tighten. And I'm sorry, Mia. I'm really sorry, Vito said, taking another step toward me with that vulnerability exposed. But I need you to know that I love you. I've always loved you since you were that provocative teenager who wore short dresses just to irritate me. A small, sad smile appeared on his face. Since you were 18 and I was 24 and I realized shit, I want her. And I can't stop wanting her, since always. My heart raced hearing those words I'd waited years to hear, but the hurt part of me resisted giving in too easily. And why didn't you ever say this before? I asked, feeling tears threaten to appear. Why did you wait so long? The pain that passed across Vito's face was so intense, I almost took a step toward him out of pure instinct. Fear, he admitted, with his voice breaking a little. Fear of not being good enough for you, of my violent and dangerous world eventually destroying you, of losing you in the same brutal way I lost my father. He took a deep breath. So I didn't touch you thinking I was protecting you, but really I was just fooling myself and slowly losing you. I blinked, trying to hold back tears, because that raw honesty was exactly what I needed to hear. And now you say all this, I said, with my voice trembling, because Miguel Torres showed up and made you jealous. The guilt that appeared on Vito's face confirmed I'd hit the mark. Yes, jealousy pushed me to finally act, he admitted without trying to hide it. But Mia, the feeling was always real. It always existed from the beginning. He took another step, getting dangerously close. Miguel just made me wake up and realize that if I don't act soon, I'm going to truly lose you. And, his voice broke in a rare way, and I don't survive losing you. I just don't survive. Tears finally started running down my face, because that absolute vulnerability coming from Don Vito Genovese was something I'd never seen before. And then something happened that completely shocked me. Vito knelt in front of me there on the terrace, and seeing such a powerful man on his knees because of me made my heart practically explode in my chest. Mia Rossi, will you date me? He asked, looking up with those dark eyes full of hope and fear. Officially, with your brother's permission, which I already asked for, with the family's blessing, and with everyone knowing you're mine, and I'm completely yours. I looked at him kneeling there, and part of me wanted to give in immediately, but the hurt part needed one last confirmation. What if I say no? I asked, testing him. What if I say you waited too long and lost your chance? The terror that appeared in his eyes was real and intense, but then Vito took a deep breath and accepted that possibility. Then I wait longer, he said with absolute determination, and I fight every day until you completely forgive me and want me again. He held my hand gently. Even if it takes years, even if it seems impossible, I wait and fight because you're worth any wait. And those words were what finally broke all my resistance, because I couldn't pretend anymore that I didn't love him with every fiber of my being. You're an idiot, I said, pulling him up forcefully. But you're my idiot. And yes, I'll date you finally. The expression of absolute relief that took over Vito's face was so intense it was almost comical. Seriously? He asked, as if he couldn't believe it. Are you really saying yes? Seriously, I confirmed, smiling through the tears. But Vito, you're going to make up for every year you made me wait. Understood? How? He asked, already pulling me closer with that urgency he always tried to hide. By being present, honest, not pulling back when things get hard. No more excuses about political complications, I said, touching his face. Just us. That's all I ask. Us. Always us. I promise, Vito said. And then finally, after years of tension and waiting, he kissed me. The kiss was explosive and full of years of repressed desire, and I held on to him, feeling all the emotions I'd kept bottled up for so long finally finding release. His hands gripped my waist, pulling me completely against his body as he deepened the kiss, and I felt my entire world finally fall into place after so much time of confusion. When we finally separated to breathe, we were both breathless, and he rested his forehead against mine with that genuine smile that rarely appeared. I love you so much, he whispered against my lips. So much it hurts. I love you too, I confessed, finally saying it out loud. I always loved you even when you were being impossible. Vito kissed me again, more gently this time, and then took my hand, intertwining our fingers. Come with me, he said in that husky voice that always affected me. I want to be with you away from everyone for a while. He led me inside the mansion, going up the stairs to his room, and my heart raced, knowing what that meant, but trusting him completely. The room was huge, and elegant, exactly as I imagined it would be. And when Vito closed the door behind us, the atmosphere changed to something more intimate and loaded with promises. "I've waited so long for this," he said, pulling me closer and kissing my neck in a way that made me tremble all over. "For you, to have you completely." The hours that followed were intense and full of discoveries as we finally allowed years of tension to find release. And each touch and kiss carried the weight of all the time we'd wasted fighting the inevitable. Vito was gentle but also possessive, marking me as his in every way possible, and I gave myself completely knowing I was finally where I'd always belonged. When we finally lay tangled in the covers with our breathing still accelerated, Vito pulled me closer, kissing my forehead with that tenderness that contrasted with the dangerous man the world knew. "You're mine now," he murmured against my hair. "And you're mine," I responded, tracing patterns on his chest. Finally, and there that night, everything changed between us in a way there was no going back from, and I knew that despite all the years of waiting and pain, we'd finally found our way to each other. Chapter 8. Dating and Annie's End.
Leave. Now.
3 months after that night at the gala where everything finally changed between us, I was practically living at the Genovese mansion, and the transition had been so natural that no one even questioned my constant presence anymore. My toothbrush was in Vito's bathroom, half my wardrobe had migrated to his closet, and I had my own drawer in the kitchen where I kept my favorite teas that the cook always kept stocked. Being the official girlfriend of Don Vito Genovese was surreal in a way I was still getting used to, because he was completely different in private from the cold, controlled man the world saw. With me, he was gentle and attentive in small ways that melted my heart, like always making sure I ate breakfast or sending messages during the day, just to know how I was. And the possessive but affectionate way he touched me in public made it clear to everyone that I was his. That Thursday afternoon, I was in the mansion's main living room, reviewing some work documents, when I heard those high-pitched and excited voices that always made me smile instantly. Sophia and Marco appeared running through the door with that infinite child energy, and when they saw me on the couch, they literally screamed with joy before throwing themselves on top of me, almost knocking my laptop to the floor. "Aunt Mia, you're here!" Sophia exclaimed, hugging my neck tightly while Marco snuggled on the other side. I laughed, closing the laptop and hugging the 2 children who'd completely stolen my heart. "Of course I am. Where else would I be?" I asked, kissing each of their foreheads. "Are you sleeping here tonight?" Marco asked with those hopeful eyes that were impossible to resist. "Maybe," I responded, fixing his messy hair. "Why do you want to know?" Sophia exchanged a conspiratorial look with her brother before answering with all the innocence in the world. "Because when you sleep here, Uncle Vito smiles in the morning," she declared, as if it were the most obvious fact. "He never smiles, but when you're here, he smiles." My heart melted completely with that pure and honest observation, and I was about to respond when I heard the deep, familiar voice coming from the door. "I do smile," Vito said, entering the room with that commanding presence he always carried. "You don't," Sophia protested, shaking her head energetically. "You only smile when Aunt Mia is here. We see it." Marco nodded, agreeing with his sister. "It's true, Uncle Vito. You get all happy when she sleeps here, and in the morning you sing in the shower." I had to bite my lip to keep from laughing, seeing the slight blush appear on Vito's normally controlled face, and he shot a warning look at his nephew before approaching us on the couch. With a fluid movement, he picked up Sophia, making her giggle, and then looked directly at me with that intensity that always made my stomach flip. "Good," Vito said, still holding Sophia, but without taking his eyes off me. "Then Aunt Mia has to stay here always, so I keep smiling." The way he said that, loaded with meaning, made me completely forget how to breathe for a second, and Sophia and Marco celebrated as if they'd just received the best gift in the world. Vito finally looked away from me to talk to the kids about going to play in the garden, and when we were finally alone in the room, he came to sit next to me, pulling my hand and intertwining our fingers. "They're right," he admitted quietly, kissing my knuckles. "I only truly smile when you're around." "You're getting soft, Don Genovese," I teased, smiling. "Completely soft for you," he agreed, without any shame. "And I don't care one bit. Those months dating had been the best of my life, because I finally had everything I'd always wanted, but it also had its challenges, especially when it came to certain people who didn't accept that Vito had made his choice. Annie Russo was at the top of that list of problematic people, and even after being humiliated several times, she still tried to insert herself into his life in increasingly desperate ways. The following week, there was a party at the Genovese mansion celebrating an important business deal, and half the Mafia elite was present, including, obviously, Annie Russo, who'd come with her uncle who was a business partner. I was talking with Cecilia near the bar when I saw Annie approach with that venomous expression she always had when she saw me, and some part of me already prepared for the confrontation that was clearly about to happen. "Mia," Annie said my name like it was an insult. What a surprise to see you here again. I turned to face her, keeping my expression calm, even though I felt irritation growing. Why would it be a surprise? I asked with my voice neutral. I'm dating the party's host. The way Annie's face contorted in poorly disguised anger told me my reminder had hit exactly where I wanted. You think you've won him? She asked with venom in her voice. He's going to get tired of you, Mia. He always gets tired of everyone. Cecilia next to me made an irritated sound and was about to interfere, but I held her arm gently because this conversation was mine to have. He won't get tired of me, I said, with absolute calm, looking directly into Annie's eyes. Because I'm different from you, Annie. Different how? She practically spat. I don't offer myself desperately, I said, keeping my voice low but firm. I don't beg for his attention or touch. I don't throw myself at him hoping for crumbs. I took a step closer. He chose me, Annie. Truly and officially chose me. And you? You were never chosen by him. Accept that and move on. The anger on Annie's face was so intense that for a second I thought she was going to physically attack me, but then she tried one last desperate move. He's going to cheat on you, she practically screamed, drawing attention from some people around. All men cheat eventually. It's just a matter of time. Before I could respond, I heard Vito's cold and dangerous voice coming from behind me, and when I turned, I saw he'd heard everything with that expression that made grown men tremble with fear. Annie, leave, he ordered, with his voice so cold it practically froze the air around. Leave my house now. Annie went pale, realizing she'd gone too far. Vito, I was just... Leave my house and my life, Vito interrupted, taking a step toward her with all the authority of a Don. And never speak to Mia or about Mia disrespectfully again. He paused, letting the weight of the next words become clear. Or the alliance with the Russos ends definitively and finally. The silence that followed was absolute, because everyone present knew Vito never made empty threats, and Annie was visibly trembling, realizing she'd completely lost any chance she thought she had. She left practically running from the party, completely humiliated, and I stood there processing the fact that Vito had just defended my honor in the most public and definitive way possible. When Annie finally disappeared, Vito turned to me with that expression softening instantly. You didn't need to do that, I said, even though I was secretly pleased he had. I did need to, Vito said, taking my face in his hands with that gentleness that contrasted with the dangerous man from seconds ago. No one talks about you that way. No one disrespects you in front of me or anywhere else. He pulled me closer, kissing my forehead. And Mia, I'll never cheat on you. Never. I know, I said, touching his chest, feeling his heart beating strong. No, you need to really know, Vito insisted, making me look into his eyes. You're not just my girlfriend or just the woman I love. You're everything to me. His voice came out husky and full of emotion. You're the reason I wake up smiling like the kids said. You're who I think about when making important decisions. You're my present and my future. He kissed my lips gently. So no, I'll never cheat on you because cheating on you would be betraying the best part of myself. Tears started running down my face because that public and intense declaration was more than I expected, and I threw myself into his arms, not caring that half the party was watching. I love you so much, I whispered against his neck. So much it sometimes scares me. I love you too, Vito responded, hugging me tight. More than words can express. Cecilia appeared at our side with that huge smile that meant she'd loved every second of the show. Annie finally understood she has no chance, she said excitedly. And everyone here saw that my brother is completely in love with you. Lisandro joined the group, laughing in that amused way. Annie ran out like the devil was chasing her, he commented, patting Vito on the shoulder. You were brutal, bro. She deserved it, Vito said simply without letting go of my waist. I warned her several times to respect Mia, and she insisted on being disrespectful. The rest of the party continued pleasantly, and I stayed by Vito's side the whole time with his hand always on some part of me, whether on my waist or intertwined with my hand. And that public display of affection was so different from the reserved man he used to be that some people commented in surprise. But Vito clearly didn't care anymore about keeping distance or hiding what he felt, and that change was the clearest proof of how our relationship had transformed him. When the party finally ended and the last guests left, Vito pulled me to his room with that familiar urgency and kissed me with all the accumulated passion from the night. You were incredible today, he murmured against my lips. The way you put Annie in her place without losing your composure was perfect. I learned from the best, I teased, smiling. And now you're mine with no one else trying to interfere, Vito said, pulling me to the bed and wrapping me in his arms. Annie was the last person who hadn't accepted that you're mine. We lay there tangled together, just enjoying each other's presence, and I felt completely at peace for the first time in a long time, knowing that finally all the complications had been resolved, and nothing stood between us anymore. Those months dating had proven that the love we shared was real and strong enough to overcome any obstacle, and I could barely wait to see what the future held for us. Will anyone else really try to interfere in this relationship? Chapter 9. Miguel threatens and Vito protects.
You're safe now.
I was leaving work that Thursday afternoon, completely oblivious to the danger waiting for me, and the only thing on my mind was that Vito had promised dinner together that night because he'd finally managed to finish all his business early. The company parking lot was practically empty because I'd stayed late finishing some reports, and that's when I heard the sound of a van stopping abruptly behind me that my heart raced with a bad feeling. Before I could react or scream, strong hands grabbed my arms, and another hand covered my mouth, preventing any sound from escaping, and I felt my body being pulled into the van while I went into absolute panic trying to struggle. There were at least 3 men holding me, and one of them tied my hands behind my back, while another put a cloth in my mouth to keep me from screaming, and the terror I felt in that moment was so intense, I could barely think straight. The van accelerated, leaving the parking lot at high speed, and I tried to memorize each turn we made, hoping to figure out where they were taking me, but after a few minutes of driving, I completely lost track of direction. My heart was beating so fast it hurt, and my mind was racing trying to understand who had kidnapped me and why. But deep down, I already had a terrible suspicion about who was behind this. After what seemed like an eternity, but was probably only 20 minutes, the van finally stopped and I was dragged out, being taken inside what looked like an abandoned warehouse. The place smelled of mold and abandonment, and when they finally removed the cloth from my mouth and threw me in a chair, tying my ankles too, I looked around trying to find some way to escape. That's when I heard that voice that confirmed my worst suspicions, and Miguel Torres entered the warehouse with that arrogant smile that made me feel instant nausea. "Mia," he said my name like we were old friends. "Sorry about the violent methods, but you didn't give me a choice." He approached, getting dangerously close. "You chose Vito, and that was a very big mistake." I looked directly into his eyes, trying not to show all the fear I felt, because showing weakness now would be fatal. "Miguel, you're an idiot," I said, with my voice coming out firmer than I expected. "Vito is going to kill you for this." Miguel laughed in that way with no humor at all that made my blood run cold. "Only if he finds me," he responded, crossing his arms. "And in the meantime, I use you to negotiate territory, power, everything I want from the Genoveses." He crouched down, getting at eye level with me. "You're my bargaining chip now." "He won't negotiate," I said with absolute conviction, even though I was tied up and vulnerable. "Vito doesn't negotiate when it comes to me. He just destroys you." The certainty in my voice made Miguel hesitate for a second, but then he recovered. "We'll see," he said, moving away. "For now, you stay here nice and quiet, while I send my demands to your protective boyfriend." Miguel left the warehouse, leaving me alone, tied in that uncomfortable chair with 2 guards watching the door, and I started working discreetly on the ropes around my wrists, trying to find some slack. Panic threatened to overwhelm me, but I forced my mind to stay focused because I knew Vito would come get me. It was just a matter of when and how. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city at the Genovese mansion, Vito was in the office reviewing some documents when his phone vibrated with a notification that made all his blood freeze instantly. The tracking app he'd discreetly installed on the necklace he gave me weeks ago showed my location moving to an abandoned industrial area, and when he tried to call me, and it went straight to voicemail, panic started to set in. Vito immediately called Lisandro, entering the office with that urgency that meant serious problems. "I need you to gather everyone now," Vito ordered, with his voice coming out cold and dangerous. "Full weaponry, all available men, and I want this ready in 10 minutes. Lisandro looked at his brother, recognizing that expression that rarely appeared. "What happened?" he asked, already grabbing his phone. "Miguel has Mia," Vito said, and just saying those words out loud made fury explode inside him. "And I'm going to end him today, definitively and with no going back." "Vito, we need to think strategically," Lisandro started, but was immediately interrupted. "No!" Vito roared, punching the desk with so much force it cracked the wood. "He touched her, Lisandro, kidnapped her, tied her up, is using her as a bargaining chip." His voice was loaded with an absolute fury that Lisandro rarely saw. "The rules are over. Diplomacy is over. I'm going to that warehouse, getting my woman, and killing that son of a bitch with my own hands." The determination and fury on Vito's face were so intense that Lisandro simply nodded and started making the necessary calls. In less than 15 minutes, 20 armed men were gathered in the mansion courtyard waiting for orders, and Vito came out of the office already wearing a bulletproof vest and checking his gun with that cold efficiency of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. "Listen well," Vito said to the assembled men with a voice of absolute command. "Miguel Torres kidnapped Mia and is holding her in a warehouse in the industrial zone." He showed the location on the tablet, I don't care how many men he has there. I don't care what kind of defense he set up. We go in, get Mia back unharmed, and anyone who tries to stop us dies. The trip to the warehouse was tense and silent, with Vito sitting in the back seat of the armored SUV, clenching his fist so hard his knuckles turned white, and Lisandro next to him knew it was better to stay quiet, because his brother was seconds away from completely exploding. When they finally arrived at the location, Vito identified at least 8 guards outside the warehouse, but that didn't make him hesitate for even a second. "Enter from all sides," Vito ordered through the communicator. "I'm going in the front, and I want total suppression. No one escapes alive if they try to stop us." What followed was fast and brutal, with the deadly efficiency that only years of experience provided, and Vito led the invasion through the main entrance, taking down 2 guards before they could even raise their weapons. The sound of gunfire echoed through the empty warehouse as Vito's team systematically neutralized all of Miguel's men, and Vito moved through the space with lethal precision, looking for only one thing. And then he saw me tied in that chair in the center of the warehouse with my face pale but intact, and the relief that went through him was so intense it almost made him stumble. Vito ran to me, knocking the chair to the floor and starting to untie the ropes with hands trembling from adrenaline and residual fear. And when he finally managed to free me, he pulled me into his arms with so much force I could barely breathe. "Are you okay?" Vito asked, pushing me back a little to examine my face and body, looking for any sign of injury. "Did he hurt you? Talk to me, Mia." Tears finally started falling because all the fear I'd been holding finally found release now that I was safe. "No, he didn't hurt me," I said, clinging to him. "Just scared me a lot, but I'm fine physically." Vito pulled me back into the tight embrace, hiding his face in my neck, and I felt him tremble with emotion while holding me like he was afraid to let go. "Never again," he swore with his voice hoarse. "I promise never again will anyone touch you like that. Never again will you be unprotected." Lisandro appeared at our side with that serious expression. "Miguel escaped through the back exit," he informed, and I felt Vito tense in my arms. "But we'll find him. It's just a matter of time." "Find him," Vito ordered, still holding me. "And when you find him, let me know immediately because I'm going to personally finish this." The following days were tense, with Vito practically keeping me locked in the mansion under constant surveillance, while his men searched for Miguel in every hole in the city, and I didn't complain about the overprotection because I was still processing the trauma of the kidnapping. Vito barely left my side, and when he needed to leave for business, he left at least 4 guards watching the mansion, and that demonstration of extreme care was both comforting and a constant reminder of the danger I'd faced. It was on Tuesday of the following week that Lisandro finally called with the news everyone had been waiting for, and the way Vito answered the phone with that predatory expression told me immediately that Miguel had been found. "Where?" was all Vito asked before hanging up and turning to me. "Stay here. I'll be back soon." "Vito," I started, but he interrupted me with a possessive kiss. "Trust me," he said against my lips. "I need to do this. Need to end the threat he represents to you." I nodded because I understood this was something Vito needed to do personally, and when he left the mansion with Lisandro and 10 more men, I stayed there waiting and praying that everything would end without more unnecessary violence. Miguel had been cornered in a cheap hotel on the outskirts of the city, trying to flee to Mexico, and when Vito entered the room with his gun pointed, his face was completely devoid of emotion. "You touched her," Vito said in that cold voice that made men beg for mercy. "You kidnapped, tied up, and terrorized my woman, and that was a fatal mistake." Miguel was visibly terrified, realizing there was no way out of this situation. "She's not your wife." He tried to argue, but Vito interrupted him. "She's mine in everything but official paperwork," Vito corrected, taking a threatening step toward him. "And that changes today. I'm going to marry her and make official what everyone already knows." He looked at Lisandro without moving the gun from Miguel. "He has a choice. Leave the city today and never come back, or die right here." Miguel practically ran out of the hotel, choosing exile over death, and Vito let him go because killing him would be too easy, and forced exile was a greater humiliation for a man with Miguel's pride. When Vito finally came home hours later, he found me waiting in the living room, and I threw myself into his arms, relieved that everything had finally ended. Chapter 10. The Proposal and Ending.
Marry me, Mia. Mia.
A week after the incident with Miguel, I was starting to return to my normal routine when I noticed Vito was acting strange, and he had that conspiratorial gleam in his eyes that meant he was planning something, but refused to tell me what it was. Cecilia was also more excited than normal, and always changed the subject when I asked what was happening, and even Lisandro had that secret smile that left me curious and frustrated at the same time. That Friday afternoon, Vito was in his office with the door closed, talking with Lisandro and Cecilia, and I could hear muffled laughter coming from inside but couldn't make out what they were talking about. It was only later when Cecilia told me everything that I discovered the reason for all that secret conspiracy, and what Vito had planned made me realize how much that impossible man truly knew me. Inside the office, Vito was sitting behind the desk with Lisandro and Cecilia in front of him, and the determination on his face was absolute when he finally said out loud what he was planning. "I'm going to propose to her," he declared, looking at the two of them. "Tonight." Cecilia practically screamed with joy, jumping in place. "Finally!" she exclaimed with that huge smile. "How are you going to do it?" Vito leaned back in his chair, with that small smile that rarely appeared. "Simple. With the family present, Sophia and Marco will help, because they adore Mia," he explained. "And it'll be on the terrace, where everything really started between us." He paused, "where I warned her about the red dress," and didn't finish the sentence. Lisandro shook his head with that expression between amusement and disbelief. "Romantic," he said, teasing his brother. "Who would have thought you have a heart underneath all that Dawn armor?" "Shut up and help me," Vito responded, but he was smiling. The following hours were crazy, with Vito organizing everything in secret, while I was completely oblivious to what was being prepared. And when night finally came, he appeared in the bedroom telling me he wanted to show me something on the terrace. I followed him, curious, having no idea what was waiting for me. And when we arrived at the terrace and I saw the decorative lights hanging and the whole family hidden in the shadows, my heart started racing. "Why are we here?" I asked, turning to look at Vito with confusion. Vito took my hands, intertwining our fingers with that soft smile. "Because this is where I said, if I see you walking around in that dress again, remember?" he asked, looking into my eyes. I laughed, remembering that night that seemed to have happened so long ago, but at the same time seemed like it was yesterday. "I remember perfectly," I responded. "You never finished the sentence." "Because I didn't know what to say in that moment," Vito admitted, caressing my fingers. "But now I know exactly what I want to say." And then, to my absolute shock, Vito knelt in front of me there on the terrace illuminated by the little lights, and seeing Don Vito Genovese on his knees for the second time because of me made my heart practically explode in my chest. "Vito," I exclaimed with my voice coming out weak with surprise. That's when I heard those familiar giggles, and Sophia and Marco appeared from the shadows holding a huge sign that said, "Marry him, Aunt Mia," with heart drawings around it, and I started laughing and crying at the same time, seeing those adorable children participating in that moment. Vito smiled, seeing my reaction, before looking back at me with that intensity that always left me breathless. "If I see you walking around in that dress again," he began, finally finishing the sentence after so long, "I'm going to take it off you slowly in our bedroom, in our house, as your husband." He took a small box from his pocket, opening it to reveal the most beautiful ring I'd ever seen. "Mia Rossi, will you marry me, officially and forever?" Tears flowed freely down my face, and I could barely speak from so much emotion. "Yes!" I practically screamed, pulling him up. "Always yes." Vito stood up quickly, taking the ring and placing it on my finger with hands trembling slightly with emotion, and then pulled me into an intense kiss, while the whole family came out of hiding, applauding and celebrating. Sophia and Marco ran to us, jumping excitedly, and Cecilia was crying with joy next to Lisandro, who had that huge smile on his face. "Uncle Vito is getting married!" Sophia screamed, jumping. "Finally! Now they'll smile always," Marco added, agreeing with his sister. Cecilia hugged me tight, laughing through tears. "You did it, girl," she said excitedly. "It worked after so many years." "It worked, yes," I agreed, laughing and looking at the ring on my finger. "After years of provoking and waiting," Lisandro patted Vito on the shoulder with that teasing expression. "You're completely soft for her," he said, shaking his head. "Completely soft," Vito agreed without any shame, pulling me closer. "And I don't care one bit." The months following the proposal were crazy with wedding preparations, because Vito insisted on doing something big and traditional that would honor both the Genovese family and the Rossi family, and I let him plan most of it because I saw how important it was for him to make everything perfect. Cecilia was my obvious maid of honor, and Sophia would be the flower girl, and seeing that 4-year-old girl trying on the little pink dress was one of the cutest things I'd ever seen. The wedding day finally arrived on a sunny and perfect Saturday morning, and when I looked at myself in the mirror, wearing the white dress with long veil, I felt like I was in a dream. The dress was elegant and sophisticated, with delicate lace and a long train, and Cecilia had cried when she saw me ready, declaring I was the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. The ceremony took place in the gardens of the Genovese mansion, decorated with thousands of white and pink flowers, and there were at least 200 people present between the two families and business associates. When the music started and I began walking down the aisle arm in arm with Levi, my eyes found Vito's waiting at the altar, and the entire world disappeared around us. Vito was wearing an impeccable black suit that made him look even more imposing and handsome, and the way he looked at at me walking toward him was so intense, I felt my heart race dangerously. Lisandro was next to him as best man, and I heard him whisper something to Vito, and then I saw my future husband murmur back with his eyes never leaving me. "She's perfect," Vito said quietly, but loud enough for Lisandro to hear. "And yours finally," Lisandro responded, smiling. When I finally reached the altar, Levi kissed my forehead before placing my hand in Vito's, and the gentle but firm grip of his fingers on mine told me everything I needed to know about how much this moment meant to him. The priest began the ceremony, but I barely paid attention because I was completely lost in Vito's eyes. And when it came time for personal vows, my heart was beating so fast I could barely breathe. Vito went first, speaking in that firm voice that carried deep emotion. "Mia, you provoked me for 12 years with short dresses, smiles at the right moment, and touches that drove me crazy," he began, and some people laughed quietly. "And I resisted for years until I couldn't resist anymore." He squeezed my hands. "You won this war between us and I completely lost, and that was the best defeat of my life." His voice got softer. "I promise to love you, protect you, and make you happy every day for the rest of my life." Tears ran down my face when it was my turn to speak. "Vito, you made me wait years being impossible, stubborn and controlling," I said, smiling through tears. "But it was worth every second of waiting because you're all that, and still completely mine." I touched his face gently. "I promise to provoke you, love you, and make you laugh always, until we're old and still together. I now pronounce you husband and wife," the priest finally said. "You may kiss the bride." Vito didn't need to hear it twice, and pulled me into a long and intense kiss, while everyone applauded and celebrated. And when we finally separated, we were both smiling in that silly way people in love smile. We walked together down the aisle as husband and wife officially, and the happiness I felt was so intense, I thought my heart would explode. The reception was beautiful and lively with delicious food and live music, and at one point Sophia came running to me with that huge smile. "Now you're Aunt Mia forever," she declared, hugging me. "I always was, sweetie," I said, kissing her head. "But now it's really official." Marco appeared next to his sister with that innocent curiosity. "And are you going to have babies now?" he asked too loudly, making several people around laugh. Vito appeared behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. "Eventually, we'll have many babies," he responded, smiling at his nephew. "Vito!" I exclaimed, feeling my face heat up. "What?" he asked, laughing. "It's true, and everyone here knows it." The party continued until late at night, and when we finally managed to escape to start our honeymoon, I was exhausted, but incredibly happy. And Vito had planned 2 weeks in Italy, visiting vineyards and historic cities I'd always wanted to see. The villa he rented was perfect with an ocean view and huge balcony, and on the first night there, we just admired the sunset, embraced. "Happy?" Vito asked, kissing my shoulder. "More than ever," I responded, snuggling closer to him. "And you?" "Very happy," he confirmed. "It was worth all the waiting and all the suffering I went through." "Sorry it took so long," he said after a few minutes of silence. I turned toward him, touching his face. "You don't need to apologize," I said firmly. "We got here together and that's what matters." I paused, smiling. "And Vito?" He murmured, pulling me closer. "Thank you for finally staying, for choosing me above everything." Vito kissed me gently before responding. "Always you since the red dress. It was always you." He smiled with that mischievous gleam in his eyes. "And Mia, you can wear red dresses whenever you want now, because I'll take them off slowly always." I laughed at that loaded promise. "Promise?" I teased. "Absolute promise," Vito confirmed, kissing me again. And there, on that balcony in Italy with the sea in the background and the entire future ahead, I knew that all the waiting, all the provocation, and all the suffering had been completely worth it, because I finally had everything I'd always wanted. Behind the scenes. You know that feeling of watching two people dance around the obvious for so long that you want to scream, "For the love of God, just kiss already"? That's exactly what made me write Mia and Vito. I was tired of passive heroines waiting for the guy to act. I wanted a protagonist who provoked, who used red dresses as declarations of war, who transformed her own vulnerability into power. Mia doesn't wait sitting down. She hunts in high heels and lipstick. Vito was harder. Powerful men are easy to write. Powerful men with fear? That's rare. I needed to show that behind the dawn there was a guy terrified of destroying the only good thing in his life. Not from weakness, from too much love. That moment of him kneeling? Total surrender. A man who commands empires on his knees for a woman who's provoked him for 12 years. The kids, Sophia and Marco, were my favorite touch. Kids don't lie. They say Uncle Vito only smiles when Aunt Mia is here, because it's true, and the adults pretend they didn't notice. Miguel Torres? Necessary. Every couple needs an external catalyst that forces delayed decisions. And the red dress is an obvious metaphor, but it works. Sometimes provocation is the only language the proud understand. And if you want to watch another story, click on the video appearing on your screen now.